The Richat structure is a heavily eroded volcano in what is now modern Mauritania. And to some on the internet, it is for sure the location of Atlantis. I disagree. Firstly, because I just don't think Atlantis was ever real. I think Plato made it up.
It's an urban legend that never happened. Not a chance.
But secondly, I think it's hard to imagine that this place is Atlantis if you look at the actual archaeology of the area. I know it's a very remote place, but there is still archaeology going on there, a lot of it. And that's what we're going to discuss today, the real, actual archaeology of the Richat structure. Joining me is the sheriff of Google debunkers himself, Milo Rossy, aka Miniminuteman. You already know him. You love him. This is actually our first ever time speaking, so that was a lot of fun. He's joining me because he just made a whole video on the archaeology of the Sahara, so it's perfect timing. Let's dig into the actual archaeology of the Richat. I'm gonna hit record so we don't miss any of this magic.
Exactly. There we go.
I haven't messed up your shot there, have I? With the twist of the camera.
I think we're all good. I will say on my little audio thing at the bottom here, I'm not getting a waveform showing up. I don't know if that's good or bad.
It seems like it's coming through on mine.
On yours, okay, that's what matters. All right, well, I think we're live then. Stefan, how's it going? We got Milo and Milo together at last.
Milo and Milo. I'm glad you made that correct pronunciation there, because I get Milo all the time.
It works perfectly. Like I told you, I get Milo all the time. I always wondered who they were talking about. Yes, it's you.
Yeah. You know, I had ambitions of our first video together, like starting in a coffee shop, and someone says like, "Coffee for Milo," and we both stand up, and then it's like
next one. Yeah. If there is one person that I have been requested to collaborate with, probably the most is probably you.
Oh, for sure. Sure, for the audience, this is a long time coming.
Yeah.
And this is literally our first conversation.
Yes.
Like,
this is it.
That's
for
the
all
exciting
our viewing
thing.
audiences, this is our first introduction, all right? You're getting this at the same pace that we are.
Yeah. By the end of it, we're totally going to hate each other and be like, well, this isn't going to work out at all. Yeah.
I hate that guy.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to be here with you today. So, talking about the Green Sahara and the Richat structure.
That's right.
Excellent.
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent.
I was preparing a video on the Green Sahara when your video on the Green Sahara came out, which is just fine, of course. Absolutely fine.
Industrial espionage.
Yeah. And but I thought it would be good to talk about the Richat structure, because obviously me and you, I mean, you more so than me, but we dabble in that pseudo-archaeology, that sweet pseudo-archaeology.
And boy, do
and the
we.
Richat structure always comes up. And when it comes up, literally no one ever mentions the archaeology of that region.
Yeah.
So
I feel like, obviously, you're the one kind of delving deep into the Richat structure right now, but I feel like whenever I hear it brought up, obviously it's in, reference to Atlantis or some long-lost civilization, and it seems like the only, evidence for it being Atlantis is the fact that it looks like concentric circles, which is, what one of the descriptions of Atlantis is, which you'd think if this really is the remnants of the most advanced civilization to ever walk the earth or whatever, there'd be a little more than just natural looking stone features in, a semi-unusual pattern. I feel like they'd be pointing to, columns and metalworking and stuff like that. But I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so different to the description of Atlantis that even if they found a civilization here, how do you know that's the one that Plato was talking about?
Yeah.
Because it's different in so many ways.
Also,
it's not an island. It's
also not underwater. Wasn't that the whole
underwater.
thing about Atlantis, is it was lost to the sea? I feel like the desert is about as far away from being under the ocean as you can get.
Yeah, I looked it up. I think it's about 500 miles from the ocean. So for sea level to have risen and drowned the Richat structure, there would be evidence all over the world of sea level rise that wiped out 500 miles of land.
Inland.
Yeah. But so let's just say I'm skeptical that this is Atlantis for sure.
Absolutely, to say the least. That being said, though, there is evidence of human habitation there.
Yeah, I was surprised. Yeah, obviously, Of course, I have to concede the Sahara is not as archaeologically well known as virtually every other region on the planet, you could
Yeah.
argue. It's a hot, dry place to be. It's politically unstable very frequently. So I was surprised when I was like, oh, but still there is literally hundreds of archaeological sites documented.
Yeah.
The region.
Despite that, it's the thing about looking for the long lost civilization of any type is when you are hypothesizing that there is something with that amount of power and prestige and scope and scale, and you're not finding any evidence for it. Like, it's not even like, oh, we found this one site that's like way crazy compared to how old it is. It's like, there's nothing. Like, we're finding hunter-gatherer camps literally everywhere, and there is not a spear point from this civilization.
Yeah, it's true. And like, if it existed, it was just a larger than average Neolithic village. Like,
yeah, more
that's
than
what we're looking for here. Like a slightly larger than average Neolithic village.
I think that's also kind of the frustrating thing is the Atlantis story is like, who isn't captivated by it? But like, we've almost lost the ability to actually kind of look at it critically because of how much of like a gospel it has become, like where the same people who are claiming like, to be really reverent of like ancient storytelling and like really like look at, what the truth might be in it are taking this as 100% fact. And, it doesn't really feel like there's any interpretation for it to be a Neolithic village, which, as someone who, studies archaeology and understands the power and importance of storytelling, like I fully agree that there could be some root truth to that story somewhere far back, even if it was a larger than average Neolithic village. But it doesn't seem like the discussion around that. It seems like it's more about finding the Atlantis.
Yeah, it has to be like all or nothing. Like, I'm perfectly willing to concede that oral history could go back to the early Neolithic period. I've made videos on oral history, arguing that oral history can go back that far. But it just has to, there has to be some element of this is a hidden truth. I don't know, like it has to be this all or nothing lost civilization. I suppose the people who are into that aren't interested in finding a larger than average Neolithic village. I don't know, because it doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't change everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all about, I think that they don't really take into account the true extent of hyperbole when it comes to repeated storytelling. Every ancient story that has been morphed and twisted over time has turned into something larger than life, and it involves gods and huge battles and like massive colossal change in the world, even if it stemmed from something that was pretty local, and that's just the nature of it. So it's funny to listen to people kind of hypothesize that Atlantis is exactly one for one what is described in Plato's story, when they will talk about how there's shreds of truth in other ancient stories.
Yeah, like the part of Plato's story, like everything about Plato's story can be questioned. Like maybe the date was this, maybe the location was this, but the one thing that can't be questioned was this an all-powerful advanced civilization?
Yeah.
That's the one thing that can never be questioned. Do you ever feel like on the internet sometimes you can get an incomplete picture or you don't get the full picture? There's a bit of information left out.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, this video is sponsored by Ground News. Okay.
That was amazing.
Got to the ad read. Guys, we all know sensational nonsense. It's everywhere on the internet. That's the entire thing we're talking about today. Sensational nonsense. It spreads everywhere. It's a huge problem. Ground News is trying to fix that problem by giving you a more data-driven approach to the news. Let me show you quickly exactly how it works. So I've got this article here about AI being used to identify Nazca lines. Incredible pattern recognition. It's a brilliant story, incredible work, but one where there's been some nonsense online, of course, the usual suspects. Ground News gives you a whole worldwide perspective on any issue you like. You can get an overview of who's publishing on it. Of course, you have links to all the different articles. You can see who owns the media companies reporting on these issues, their political biases. You can see their factuality, which is based on scores by 3 media monitoring services. There's truly no better way to get a broad global perspective on an issue. Obviously, we're talking about archaeology here, but it really comes in handy when we're talking politics, elections, the things that dominate our life but are fed to us by annoying algorithms. showing me what I think I want instead of a broad perspective. Ground News has that broad perspective, provides more insight than any one article ever could, obviously. Maybe exposes you to some bias in your media diet, and it just helps you form a more well-rounded opinion. You want a bigger picture, you want to know the bigger picture, then I think Ground News is the service for you. They're independent, subscriber funded, but you will save 40% from the Vantage plan, which is what I have here. If you go to groundnews.com/Stefan or click on the QR code wherever it is on the screen. But yeah, thank you so much for sponsoring this video, Ground News, and for supporting content that wants to get to the facts. That's what they're about too. Let's look at the facts of what's going on in the Richat structure. Bada bing, bada boom. Anyway, let's dig into them, man. Let's dig into them. So I have emailed you a Google Drive.
Ah, I saw that, yes. Oh, okay. Theodore Monod. Whoa.
Theodore Monod. I don't expect you to know who Theodore Monod is. By any chance, do you?
I don't believe I do, no.
This guy, I also likewise had no idea before I looked into this. This guy is a #1 gangster. Now, I also don't know anything about this guy, so if he did something absolutely horrendous and cancelable by 2024 standards, I do not know, okay? I do not know what went on in this man's personal life. But I don't mean to slander him like that, because he is an absolute legend. Get this. He has published over 700 scientific works in his lifetime. He gave his name to 30 species of insects and plants, 50 crustaceans, and several fish. I don't know how many fish, it just says several fish. This man is a prolific, I don't know, bon vivant scientist, French naturalist, archaeologist, explorer is how he seems to be titled. And yeah, he went to the Richat in the 1970s to see what was going on. Actually, first of all, let me see. In these pictures here, you can see the pictures you're looking at, except for the last one that says famous French scientist. How old do you think he is here whilst he's exploring the Richat?
Oh, man. 70?
70? Try 96.
You are kidding me.
Yeah, he was still exploring the Richat at 96 years old.
Woo! Wow. I hope to be able to walk when I'm 96. I hope that I'm alive when I'm 96 years old.
Yeah. I think a trip to the Sahara would wipe me out now. Never mind when I'm 96.
Wow, look at him go, dude. That's awesome. With his little monocle on, that's sick.
Yeah, he's a real tough guy. Apparently, according to his Wikipedia, he was a lifelong vegetarian and animal rights activist. And once walked 600 miles through the Sahara Desert to prove you could be tough on a vegetarian diet. So
point taken.
He's just a guy. Like, I don't know anything about him other than this, but he just seems like an absolute G, an absolute gangster.
That is awesome.
Absolute mad lad. Yeah.
Wow. I'm inspired by that. I want to be following in those footsteps, you know?
I know. Yeah, it makes me feel kind of pathetic, to be honest.
Really. I thought I was doing cool stuff with my life. I guess not.
No, yeah.
I walked to my mailbox this morning.
Yeah. I suppose I've still got 61 years to catch up to him, you know. So
I hate to say it, man. I think we're already behind.
Yeah. But he was the first man, it seems, to find archaeology in the Richat in any way. If you go to folder 2, Stone Tools, we'll take a look at what he found here.
Wow, beautiful. So, look at those.
Yeah.
Damn.
If you see if you open the map, can you see the map there where it shows the Richat really clearly?
Yeah, for sure.
So he's explored the whole thing, but it seems that a lot of these artifacts are coming from the outer rim of the Richat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in this northern region of the Richat. And I've read several papers about this. This is an important time to put the caveat here. A lot of these papers are published in French. The Richat is in Mauritania, former colony of France. France is doing the majority of the research in this region. The majority of the papers are published in French, so I had a French archaeologist translate these for me.
Excellent. Okay.
So
any errors, those are on him.
Any errors, those are on her. Yeah. It's just to clarify that. And I do wonder, to be generous to people that support Atlantis, sometimes I do wonder if there is just a language barrier to this information, if I'm being generous.
Could be. The language barrier certainly wouldn't help.
No, exactly. So, but there are several French people out there in the world, and they are available to help you read these things.
Population of France, several.
Yeah, several French people. So it is possible to get the information even published in French. But one thing that's really interesting, and might be a bit of a bummer for the Atlantean people, you can see when you look at an image of the Richat, and when you look at this map too, there's clearly still water moving in and around the landscape, and it has been. Like, it's not like it never, ever rains here. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, even in the Sahara, they get precipitation, they get water. Apparently, though, the interior of the ring is almost entirely devoid of artifacts and animals, according to these French people, because it is particularly dry, even in this region.
Wow.
And they find a lot of the archaeology actually in the outer rings, just because humans and animals struggle with no water. It's kind of a thing we need.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely see that. I think that this is an interesting map to look at because you can see all the little tributaries. And like you said, even though the Sahara is a desert, it does still get rain. And I think that especially, in antiquity, when there was more rain in this region, which I would imagine is probably when more of these artifacts date to, I'd imagine they probably, will date back to the African humid period, or at least around then. This would be a great place to be. Again, the Richat is surrounded by a lot of open desert. And so being in a place that not only has some elevation to trap moisture, but also has sort of these valleys and channels that fresh water will flow down, will not only provide fresh water, but also all the things that come with it, plants and, animals and things like that. And not only with that middle part, it's interesting that it gets less fresh water, but also, if I was someone, hunting and gathering around the Richat structure, I probably wouldn't go through the effort of crossing all of those little hills and ridges and, rough terrain to get to a part of the structure that just doesn't have anything worthwhile in it. I'd stay on the outside.
Yeah. You might pop your head up to see what's over there, but as soon as you realize, this is the place where there's no water and no animals.
Yeah.
You're probably going to bounce pretty quickly. Be like, okay, I'm going back to my nice little stream where there's things I can do and things I can eat.
And shade too. I mean, it would be blazing hot in the sun, and just looking at the relief of this map, those kind of canyon walls on the far outskirts of the structure look like they would be pretty steep. And so, it's almost reminding me of something that we'd see in the American Southwest, where a lot of, kind of culture arose in very flat desert lands around, canyons and gullies and things like that, just because A, it's a place where water, has settled, and B, it does have, sort of shade and some shelter.
The main thing I think that he found in his early excavations, and I should also shout out archaeologist Robert Vernet here. Is it Vernet? Another guy who has a whole blog all about the archaeology of Sahara, another archaeologist. It'll be in the description. All sources will be in the description, so you can Google debunk me for yourself, as the Milo Rossy fans will know.
You heard the man. Get Google debunking.
Get Google debunking on me right now. But remember, it's not my fault. It's the French archaeologist's fault.
As always, blame the French.
Yeah. But yeah, they're finding a lot of what they're calling galets aménage. These are really, really primitive worked pebbles. You can see in the folder there, we've got some pictures of them lying on the ground.
Yeah.
And then some detailed drawings of what's actually being found.
They are very rough.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I don't even think at first glance I would identify those as tools. That's crazy. I would look right past that.
Yes, exactly. You would look right past it. If you look at the fourth image where it shows lots of different rocks, all with the drawing. Yeah. This is when I was chatting to these archaeologists that study the site Lamekwi, oldest archaeological site in the world. I was asking them, how the hell are you identifying these rocks as tools? Mm-hmm. And obviously they've got an eye for it, but you've got to think, you can see a lot of these rocks, they're all worked on one side. Someone is going along and taking chip after chip after chip after chip in a line across this rock. So you could imagine a natural scenario where a rock is being hit on one side repeatedly. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe it rolled down a hill and by chance it got hit on the
Yeah.
same side time after time. But when you find 10
That
rocks like that,
that
20
many.
rocks like that,
Yep.
100 rocks like that, all worked in that same logical fashion, what are the odds of nature bashing 100 rocks in the
Yeah.
same spot time after time after time? That's basically how they determine they have a really ancient Paleolithic site versus just a random rock.
Wow. That's crazy. That is a lot of those. And it's interesting kind of looking at the variation and complexity of them. Like some of them have quite a bit of napping and sharpening with a lot of different like faces, but there's other ones that look like they've just been struck like, with two like large flakes coming off.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that's interesting with these, on the one hand, you're making this sort of like chopper, you could call it, this
Mhm.
worked pebble, but you're also getting the flake, right? And so
Mhm.
what were these ancient hominins trying to do at that moment in time? Were they after a chopper? Were they after the flake?
Yeah, yeah.
What is the tool? Is this even the tool? It's interesting to
Yeah, that
wonder
that could
about
be the
that.
byproduct. They could have been getting just a thin blade.
Yeah,
Yeah, very
exactly.
cool.
So these are very difficult to date. As you can see, these are lying on the surface, which is
Mhm.
always a challenge to date. But probably the youngest I would imagine these tools would be is 1 million years old, and
Wow.
potentially up to 3 million
So
easily.
do you have any sort of idea, or is there any research on, what sort of, human ancestor created these?
That's an interesting question. So one of the challenges in West Africa is that there are not many human remains. In fact, I don't think there are any human remains or archaic human remains from this time period.
Wow.
They all seem to be found in southern and East Africa, but
Hmm.
we know from the tools that they're here.
Yeah, yeah.
There's just for some reason, maybe it's the conditions, maybe the fluctuation of like green Sahara to dry Sahara
Oh,
is
rotted out the bones. Yeah, because
is
that would have been through
doing
quite a
something.
few humid periods then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only one that's in the Sahara is Sahelanthropus chadensis, and that's a
Mm,
very old human fossil, like over 4 million years. Probably wasn't them making these tools. I even
yeah.
have the skulls, though, fortunately. This isn't Sahelanthropus, this is Homo habilis, but
Oh, look at that.
I would imagine a hominin like Homo habilis is responsible for these, maybe some sort of early Homo erectus. But it could also be like an Australopith like Lucy. We're finding these tools older and older the more
Mhm.
we study.
I'm looking at this fifth slide now with some of these points. These look like they're pretty notably worked down. Are these different than the points that are shown in the fourth slide?
Yeah. So now we've moved forward in time to what is called the Acheulean period.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
These tools, humans were using these for like over 1 million years. It's by far and away our most best popular tool we've ever come up with. Pointy rock to hold in hand.
Yep.
But
It's not the pencil. It's not the bladed knife. It's this rock.
It's a rock.
yeah, this rock, pointy rock in hand. This was the tool that we loved for so long. We've been making them for so long. You can see at this point, if you compare it to the earlier choppers, we've worked out how to make a symmetrical tool
Mm-hmm.
for a start, which says, it's probably functional. It is probably functional, but it does raise the question of, by this point in time, and we're talking probably anywhere from 1.5 million years ago down to 500,000 years ago for this,
Mm-hmm.
did hominins, a Homo erectus, did they have an appreciation for symmetry, like form? What's going on in their brain? You can't call it art,
Mm-hmm.
but is it the first step towards art is an appreciation of like a symmetrical design?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, I know that's something that is, debated quite a lot is, when does art truly arise and what could be constituted as art? But, I think the thing to think about is, like, would there be any functional reason to have something that symmetrical? Does it make sense to make it symmetrical all the time? Are you only using one side of it? They kind of look, some of them resemble a spear point, which could make sense having a symmetrical design to it. Or is that something that was done just because it scratched that little itch in our brain, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I'm sure there is a functional reason why a tool should be this shape, in the same way it works for an arrowhead, right? There's got to be, there's got to be some functional benefit to it coming to a point. And others, they're almost doing more as like giant choppers, almost like a modern axe would be. They're
Yeah.
trying to create one big like cutting surface.
Yeah, that
But
middle row and some of the ones on the bottom right really look like an axe head.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there's got to be a functional element to it, but again, you can't help but wonder.
They're beautiful. They're
Yeah.
really amazing. I really like that one on the far right in the center with the stripes on it. I don't know where it's from, but I saw something
These are all
recently
from the
about
Richat. Oh,
that's
sorry. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
no,
no.
I saw something recently about a spear point that was found, and it was made out of some sedimentary rock, and it had like a trilobite or some fossil in it, and like that's another one of those questions where it's like, I assume they left it in there intentionally, like they probably broke the rock and found that and kind of sculpted the
Yeah.
the lithic around the fossil, which is pretty interesting,
Yeah, you start to get. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure it's appearing on screen as we speak.
It is.
You can't help. It's so hard to imagine that they didn't do that deliberately and didn't have an
Mhm.
appreciation of stuff like that. So I'm not saying Homo erectus made art or anything like that, but did they have like a visual appreciation for things? I think so. I think we're starting to see that evolving in our brains at this time.
Yeah, and I think
Let
that's
me see.
something that it may be hard for us to see in the same way, just because what we view as art is something that's so complex now. Hey, look at
Yeah.
that guy.
So this is probably the kind of the chap that's making these. This is the Takana boy, the Nariokatomi boy,
Hey, I know that
and
guy.
yeah, he lived probably about 500,000 years after Homo habilis, and you can see in that time we've come a long way.
Yeah, that's a big
Brain
old
size,
brain right there.
yeah. So with that increased brain evolution, is there some appreciation for the form factor? I think so.
Yeah,
And
I believe it.
again, like, I'm going to show you a map at the end. You can probably already see it in the Google screen, but you will not believe how many of these freaking things are in the Richat.
I
Like,
know. I've been trying not to click on that one. It looks
yeah,
very interesting.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things. All right, last one, arrowheads. I'm sure you can see
Look
the
at
one that I'm talking
those.
about.
Those are beautiful.
Yeah, these are called Aterian points.
Hmm.
These, by the time we're making these, we're talking 150,000 years ago, up until 20,000 years ago. I've read it's difficult to date, but this is modern humans. This is anatomically modern humans making
Wow.
these. You can see that. I don't know. I know these probably are not arrowheads. I would say, sorry, these are probably spearheads, I would imagine. But you can clearly see these are hafted, right? They've got that little. They've got that little knob at the end. There's no other way to say it. I don't know the
Yep.
technical terms. They've got a little knob. What's cool about these Aterian points is that they're kind of associated with out of Africa a little bit, or at least our very earliest attempts of out of Africa. I did a video on the Paleolithic in India, and they have them as far away as India, maybe about 100,000 years ago.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
we've sort of got the whole gamut of the Paleolithic here, from the very earliest stone tool production through to like Homo erectus making Acheulean hand axes, down to modern humans expanding out of Africa, expanding on a huge geographical area with hafted stone points that are much more
Wow.
sophisticated. Let's look at the map. Let's look at the map
Let's
to
have
see
a
how
look at the
many
map.
archaeological sites.
Holy shit.
This is how
Whoa.
many archaeological sites just for the Paleolithic they have around the Richat structure.
Wow.
Like I said, I was like, I'll count them quickly just before you hop on screen, and then I was like, oh, actually, no, I won't. This is
Good choice.
yeah,
And the thing that's really interesting, about this, bringing it back to kind of the Atlantis conspiracies around this site, is not only is there extensive archaeological history at this site that is not talked about, but it is extensive archaeological history that covers literally more than 1 million years of human history. Like, it's not just
Yeah.
like, oh, we found a few things from a long time ago and like there's nothing recent, so like we don't know, it could have been here and it just all disappeared. It's like, no, we have like a chronology of this site. Like, there is evidence and it is extensive and covers a really long time span. It's all right there.
Yeah. Millions and millions of years humans have been living around the Richat structure. Now, I might ask myself, how come hundreds of Paleolithic sites have been found and yet nothing from this civilization has been found? You know, I might be inclined to ask myself that.
Whoa, you're thinking way too critically here, dude. Take it down a notch.
Yeah, and there always has to be some explanation of like, how come all these sites survived but Atlantis never survived?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We have million-year-old hand axes, but nothing from what was for many years the most advanced civilization on the world. Like,
Yeah.
none of that stuff survived. You're asking too much. We just haven't found it yet, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's our trawl through the Paleolithic. I want to take a brief look at rock art, if that's
I
okay.
love rock art.
But maybe now we're sort of getting into the African humid
This
period,
is the humid
though.
period. Looking at it, whoa! I just saw the carved stone elephant out of a rock. Look at that.
That's not from the Richat, but this is just examples of the culture we're talking about. But yeah, there's like a whole elephant statue in the Sahara.
Oh my
It's kind
God.
of crazy. Do you mind rattling off for us quickly? Why is the Sahara going dry then green then dry then green? Do you remember that from your video?
Absolutely. That would be because of the Milankovitch cycles. So that has to do with where the Earth kind of wobbles as it spins, and it wobbles on a cycle of about 20,000 years. So it'll the North Pole will tilt in different directions. And as that tilt happens, it affects what part of the planet is facing the sun during the perihelion, which is the closest that the Earth orbits the sun. So during the African humid period, the perihelion occurred when I think the southern side of the planet was closest to the sun. And now that cycle has changed and the Earth has tilted again, the perihelion occurs when the sun is kind of focusing a blast. Oh no, vice versa. The sun is now blasting the southern part of the planet during the perihelion, where during the African humid period, it was blasting on the Sahara area in the northern hemisphere. And because of that, it evaporated a lot more ocean water, which created monsoon seasons that would sweep over the continent. So even though a lot more sunlight was hitting the Sahara desert, it was creating a discrepancy in temperature. So the land would heat up a bunch and the ocean would evaporate and make a bunch of moisture. And then as the seasons would change, it would cause huge monsoons to sweep inland and inundate most of northern Africa in monsoonal rains.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that still must be going on then. Obviously, the Earth hasn't stopped wobbling, so...
Yep. Yeah, so it's on cycles. I believe that African humid periods have been occurring about once every 20,000 years, I think since the start of the last ice age. So for over, 1.5 million years, I think that there's been kind of this cycle, or at least around there. I know that I think that at the very least, I remember reading somewhere that it was like, 800 African humid periods or something like that estimated. So it is a cycle that, humankind has probably seen for many hundreds of thousands of years, really as long as we've lived.
As we finish with the map, let's start with the map as well. These are all the sites where rock art has been recorded around the Adrar plateau. There's quite a lot, as you can see. This isn't just one site we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And then, do you see the one? I just renamed it. You might have to hit refresh. Richat Elephant.
Richat Elephant, yes. Wow. That elephant is, he's packing.
Oh, yeah. He's packing. He's got a bird on his tusk. He's living life. He's living life large.
Man, wish I could be that elephant.
Yeah. Kind of showing off a little bit.
Yeah, actually. Really. Cool it there, big
guy. So this elephant comes from the inside of the Richat. You can see there's a gentleman hunting it, perhaps with a spear and a shield, maybe. The alternative history crowd, the pseudo-archaeology crowd, they do love this image because apparently Plato mentioned elephants in Atlantis. And they're like, well, here's an elephant in what we think is Atlantis.
Hey,
and it is a cool ass picture of an elephant. I'm not going to deny them that.
It is, but look at, I think the really funny thing is looking at the evidence that they give versus the evidence that they should be providing that they ignore, like,
Yeah.
okay, he mentioned elephants and there's a carving of an elephant. How about the fact that they were supposed to be more technologically advanced than Athens? Like, where's the evidence for that? I don't really give a shit if there's elephants or not, Like, it's Africa and it was rainy. Of course there was elephants. Like, are you kidding
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
All this rock art has survived showing what we would expect. First there's animals and scenes of humans hunting animals, and then as the Neolithic develops and people develop agricultural and herding societies, then we get pictures of cows and people herding them and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Exactly what we would expect in the real timeline is what we have.
Yep.
But there's no, images of life in Atlantis anywhere on this Adrar plateau.
Hey, there's that one guy with a spear.
One guy with a spear, yeah.
That's pretty good. That seems like Atlantis to me.
Pretty advanced, yeah.
Very.
Yeah, if the definition of advanced was Neolithic village and guys with spears, then it's like, okay, yeah, Atlantis was real. Yeah, that did exist.
Stefan, maybe that's where we're wrong. Maybe they are saying that it was just a really big Neolithic village and we're the ones who are blowing it out of proportion.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
It is, man. It's funny. And again, the real sort of takeaway here is the fact that this conspiracy and beating this, dead horse, or I guess dead elephant, as it were, is something that really takes away from the actual archaeology of not only the Richat structure, but of the Sahara and Africa as a whole. I mean, it's interesting hearing a lot of the alternative history crowd talk about like how there's been there's been not enough excavation in Africa, and that's a huge, injustice, which I fully agree with. I think it needs to be massively more explored. I think many parts of the world have been sort of largely left behind and need to have more excavation done at them. But then they just make stuff up. They don't talk about any of the actual excavation that has happened there. They don't talk about the massive timeline of human history at these sites and what it actually means and the evidence that we truly have. Instead, they start with conclusion and, we'll just search desperately to find literally anything to support it, even if that is one carving of an elephant.
Yeah, it is annoying to focus so heavily on this carving of an elephant, albeit a very cool one, and to ignore the entire, cultural tradition of these artworks stretching across the Sahara. And, some of these are, genuinely incredible pieces of art. I'm looking at what I think maybe you're going to see as the fourth picture. It's like a zoomed in shot of an elephant.
A carved elephant. It's magnificent. It's beautiful.
To focus on just the one because it's an elephant and Plato mentioned elephants, and to ignore this whole artistic tradition that stretches across the Sahara, it's just it's silly. It's silly.
It is. And it's unfortunate because just like you said, with both the art and with the lithic artifacts, it's a whole timeline. The lithics and the artwork tell a story. They show the rise of the Green Sahara. They show, how people hunted the natural wildlife that was there. It gives us a window into what the animals were like that were there. And then it shows us as the Green Sahara began to, get smaller and smaller and people were forced into, there's carvings of cattle and goats and things like that. It really tells a story. The full story is there. And it's really frustrating to see people not try and, add to the story and be able to continue the interpretations that we have and really flesh it out further, but instead try and ignore the entire thing and pretend that they have their own story for which there's no evidence.
Yeah. It's because Atlantis has to be this advanced thing, this information, they have to discard it in a way because it just doesn't fit, with their timeline of how they think humanity developed.
Yeah. And so the only thing they have to go off is vague descriptions in the stories and, the carving of the elephant. It's ridiculous. It really is. And it's a shame because so many of the people who are drawn to these theories are people who are genuinely interested in archaeology and history and things like that. And there is so much great information on it out there that they are not finding because there's people who make this sensationalized content that is more preying on people's interest than actually being dedicated to telling them the truth and the things that they'd actually be interested in.
Yeah. This is a great time. I'll probably have to put this caveat at the start of the video because this is the internet. And if it's possible to take something the wrong way, it will be taken the wrong way. But I'm 100% sure me and Milo here, we're not hating on the random person who is interested in Atlantis. They didn't have an education in archaeology, blah, blah, blah. Like, of course, we also think all of this stuff is cool and amazing, and have dedicated our educational and professional lives to talking about it. So of course we love it. This is more directed at, the whole economy of like YouTubers and bloggers, blah, 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 who make quite large sums of money talking about this stuff and not giving people who are interested the context that these things are found in at all.
Completely. Well said. Yeah. And I encourage anyone listening who has entertained any of these theories to just continue digging on it, continue doing, research on it. I think that a lot of the people that peddle a lot of these theories that are poorly supported talk a lot about doing your own research and things like that. And I encourage doing your own research, but doing your own research doesn't just mean listening to, the same guy who's going to just reinforce, what he already believes. And, look at all the evidence, look at all of the different sites, and look at the immense amount of research that's been done there, and you can draw your own conclusions from that.
I do have to say there is like a couple of Google Earth screenshots of sites in Atlantis. To finish on positive for people that are really into it, they are very, very good at scouring Google Earth. And that is a legitimate technique in archaeology to find sites using Google Earth. The thing is, for this to have been Atlantis, if the idea is that Atlantis was swept away in this huge flood, then these have to post-date Atlantis. So these are, cool things to have seen from Google Earth for sure. And shout out to the people who found them. But there's no logical way that they could be Atlantis. And if you hit refresh on the conspiracy thing.
And if the flood did wash away Atlantis, why didn't it wash away any of the Paleolithic artifacts?
Well, quite, yes. So these are, you can see one of them is called Richat triangles.
Wow. Yep, that looks
I
like
would
Atlantis
bet these are
me.
Animal enclosures, personally.
Yep.
Because if you zoom in particularly on the left one, you have like a round structure, which is maybe a house, and then the entrance to the enclosure is by that house. And as a triangle, I think it would funnel animals towards that opening. That's just my hunch. Exactly, of course, right. I've never been there. My hunch is that these are just animal enclosures used by the local people.
Yep. And then that is literally just a fence. That second one, are you kidding me?
What, the Richat enclosure?
What the hell, bro? That is just a fence.
I mean, I don't know what it is. It's hard to get a scale. And there's clearly something going on around that edge.
Yeah.
But,
maybe it's a wall, like a low stone wall to keep.
I think this is
like
a wall,
an animal enclosure, but like there's nothing around it. Like there's no context to any of these, and there's no artifacts. Like I fully believe that people are finding things there, and they very well may be archaeological sites. It's very possible that people built stone structures. I'm not diminishing that, but I don't think that they're Atlantis.
According to Google Earth, this thing is 72 meters across, so it's quite a large enclosure. How many feet is that? I have no idea. Americans, you have to Google that yourself.
72 meters to feet. 236 feet. That's pretty big.
It's a big enclosure. These things aren't small. But I think what's important to keep in mind is that the Richat is a remote part of the world, but it's not devoid of human life. There were trade networks across the Sahara throughout every human period you want to mention, including the medieval period, the early modern period, and there's going to be something there. There's going to be enclosures there. But I just have to mention it because I just know if I talk about actual archaeology of the Richat, people are going to be like, you didn't mention these 3 enclosures.
Wow. Grasping at straws.
It's a little bit grasping at straws, yeah. Let me show you one last thing. Let's do it. Because all of that is very well and good, Milo. But maybe we're not finding Atlantis because we're the liars, okay? We're lying. We're funded.
Dude,
and we're keeping this information from you. I know. I'm pulling back the curtains.
Man, yeah. The Smithsonian, National Geographic, Harvard, the CDC actually is paying me for this too.
So these screenshots here that you can see, these are from a YouTube channel called Itchy Boots. I haven't seen all of her videos, but I suspect you might like her because she was traveling Africa on a motorbike, and you're a biker yourself, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm more of a moped guy, personally. That's more my speed.
Rock on.
Yeah. I'm more of a Vespa in my flip-flops. But shout out to her. I don't know much about Itchy Boots, but I was looking for videos about the Richat, and she went there in her motorbike. She did have an accident in Africa and had to be flown home. So if you're watching this, Itchy Boots, I hope you're recovering okay.
Yeah, get well soon. Ride safe.
Yeah, but she was vlogging this motorbike journey across Africa and went to the Richat. And as you can see there's a screenshot of a guy with sunglasses on from the video. This is the village chief next to the Richat. You can see the Richat sort of peeking up behind him there, I believe. These are the people that are living in this area day in, day out. These aren't archaeologists just visiting for an expedition. And he has what is somewhat of a local museum, dare I say, shop. And you can see from this screenshot what kind of artifacts he has.
Wow. Well, I mean, that has all the hallmarks of a highly advanced civilization right there.
Yeah.
Stones,
hundreds and hundreds
pointy
of
Rocks.
Paleolithic artifacts,
Damn.
Pointy rocks. There is some other stuff in the video. There's like a nice vase, other stuff that we might expect from the green humid period. Maybe those are even grinding stones behind those stone points there. That's a possibility. But if you are of the mind that archaeologists are not finding Atlantis because we're not looking for it, or we're not being funded to look for it, and blah 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 blah, I would like you to consider how little the guy in this village cares about any of this, right? Like, this guy is just living there. This is where him and his people have lived for centuries, for millennia. And he's just talking to people as they're coming to visit the Richat. And what does he have to show you? Paleolithic stone tools.
Yep.
Okay, Paleolithic stone tools.
You would think that you would think that Atlantis, something that big, would have ruins and relics that are literally impossible to miss. Yeah. And even if the archaeologists are being paid off to cover it up, to keep you in the dark, you'd think the guy that lived there would at least have stumbled across a few of them. Unless they were just, Neolithic tools, and there was no Atlantis there.
Yeah. Like,
maybe he's being paid. No, I think what happened, archaeologists went, destroyed all the evidence of Atlantis. Bit by bit, they got every potsherd out of the dirt, filtered it, and then they let the people move back in. And then they placed all these artifacts.
Yeah.
Trust me, we have that much power.
Yeah. That's exactly the kind of thing an archaeologist would do, yeah.
Yep.
But I just thought,
That's great. I mean, that's honestly, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an excellent, retort to the thing it always turns to whenever people get backed into a corner with actual evidence is, well, they're out to get you, or they're lying, or they're being paid off, or something like that, which is like, that's just a cop-out argument. Like, why don't you actually support what you're saying? How about
exactly,
that?
Yeah.
But this is a great retort to that, where it's like, no, these guys live there. If there was any Atlantis, they'd be the ones finding them, and they haven't, because it's not there.
Yeah, this guy is there, like, this guy's in the Richat every day of his whole life.
Yeah.
And he hasn't found it, guys. He just hasn't found it. He's found plenty of archaeology.
Yeah,
like, he has found plenty of archaeology. It's just not of Atlantis. It just isn't. All right, well, that's all I know about the archaeology of the Richat. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Milo.
I don't know, man.
Dude, it's so hard for me to say Milo because I'm so used to saying Milo. It's like my tongue struggles every time. Me. Yeah.
Thanks, Milo. It's been good hanging out with you.
Yeah.
Well,
Milo Rossy and Stefan Milo.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing this video, Stefan. I'm excited to see when it all comes out. And for any of Stefan's viewers, I'm Milo Rossy. Come check me out, YouTube, Miniminuteman. And for any of my viewers who are watching this, subscribe to Stefan. He makes great stuff.
There you go.